Hello there, and welcome back to the Schools of Excellence podcast. So, I have a question. Well, kind of like a statement, I think, more than anything. I think a lot of us sit in moments of, wow, my school can really run without me. My business can run without me. These things they're running, they're good. And most schools can run without the owner, especially schools that have some really solid systems and processes. The school can run, but running is not the same as thinking. So a school running without you is one thing. A school thinking without you is a totally different thing. And so the stage of, can my school think without me, usually shows up after years of hard work, right? You've hired capable people. You've built really solid systems. You've clarified roles and responsibilities. You've delegated tasks. You've stepped out of the classroom. You've stepped out of administration. You stopped doing everything yourself. And from the outside, man, success, right? But you're still looped in. You're still escalated to. And you're still pulled back into decisions that you thought you handed off. Again, not because things aren't running. Things are running. But because something unexpected keeps happening. A school that can run without you means that classrooms open on time, schedules hold, meetings happen, reports get submitted, tasks move through the system. And a lot of schools get to this place, and it's amazing. But a school that can think without you means something very different. It means that the right decision is made even when there's ambiguity and you're not there. It means that your team can interpret situations, not just follow directions. It means that nuance is handled without panic. It means that people don't freeze when something isn't inside the SOP system or playbook. It means that discernment doesn't default back to you. Very few schools get here, right? I often talk, I've shared many times this story where many years ago when we lived in New York City, we went to an event and it was cold. It was New York, the winter. And so there's a coat check room, right? So I check in my coat and you get this little yellow tag or whatever color it is. So at the end of the evening, you can come and get your coat back. So I go in and I didn't bring a purse with me. So I kept that little tag of what number my coat is on the table. And I went to go dance. And then when I came back to my table, that coat thing was missing. And I didn't remember what number I was. So at the end of the evening, I went to the coat check room and I told the lady behind the counter, I said, I don't have my tag, but I can tell you exactly what my coat looks like. And she's like, oh, you can't do that. And I was like, ma'am, my coat is actually right over there. It's a white coat. There are 9 buttons on each side. If you put your hand in the right-hand pocket, there's a hole that sticks all the way down. The left-hand pocket isn't ripped. It's the right one. In the back, you'll see a tiny stain from my son. And I'm like, go look. If all of those things are there, that's my coat. So she goes over there and she sees all the things. And she's like, yeah, but I still can't give you your coat because you don't have the ticket. And I was like, okay. I understand that the policy is no ticket, no coat. But there are other ways to identify if that's someone's coat. And I've just given you close to 8 identifying details of how that's my coat. So I'd like my coat. She's like, I can't do that. And I was like, okay. So I went back inside the ballroom and I looked for the general manager of the building, who I happen to know. And I found him and I was like, hey, I need my coat. I don't have my coat tag. I told your coat check lady and gave her 9 identifying details of my coat, but she still won't give me my coat. Can you get it for me? So he starts laughing and he goes downstairs and he goes inside the room and he's like, Chanie, which one's your coat? So I tell him and he gets me my coat. I get my coat and you don't understand, at this point, it's already the end of the evening and there's a massive line, right? So everyone already saw the scene of me trying to get my coat. So when the general manager came and gave me my coat, there was like a massive applause and celebration that I got my white coat. I tell this story often because I have so many other stories about just people trained not to think. That is a perfect example of someone inside of an organization that is trained to not think. So they are trained on how to run the coat check room, system, process, policy. They are literally taught, do not think, do not discern, do not use your brain. Because if you were to use your brain, I don't know that we can trust your brain usage. Because brain usage would mean, yes, this woman didn't have her coat number, but she is giving me 8 identifying details of her coat. So that would tell me that she isn't stealing someone else's coat. But that would require thinking. That would require the activation of brain cells. That would require discernment. And that is scary to actually give and install into your team, because it's so much safer to say, no coat thing, no coat. So here's what actually happens inside of schools and organizations when leaders try to step back too early, right? They install all these systems, they install these processes, and they're like, okay, figure it out. I'm not here today. You got to figure it out, right? Everyone just figure it out. But what happens is that a situation comes up that isn't in the handbook. A family concern comes up that isn't in a policy. A staffing issue that isn't clearly right or wrong. A decision that can go multiple ways and have multiple different impacts. And then suddenly uncertainty rises. People get anxious about making the wrong call. Something gets escalated to do, and you're back in the day-to-day. And you're not just doing tasks. Now you're doing discernment. You're doing interpreting. You're doing reassuring. You're deciding what matters. You're holding the emotional weight of uncertainty. And the thing that you have to understand is that you didn't fail at execution. You failed at externalizing discernment. You missed the step at externalizing discernment. So what does thinking actually mean in a school? Okay. So when I say thinking, I'm not talking about strategy or vision statements. I'm talking about discernment. And I have a whole chapter in my book, This Can't Be Normal, on discernment. Okay. Discernment is the quiet practiced ability to tell the difference between things that look similar on the surface, but require completely different responses. Okay. Good doctors are amazing at discernment, right? 2 people come in with a headache, same symptoms, but one person has a hangover because they had too much alcohol and didn't go to sleep last night. And the other person has a headache because they are pre-brain aneurysm. Okay. 2 completely different responses, same symptoms. Okay. Discernment and thinking without you is knowing the difference between a tough season and a real performance issue of a teacher. These distinctions are everything, right? Because a tough season needs support. A performance issue needs a consequence and a standard. Burnout needs relief. If the teacher is avoiding, she needs accountability, right? And so the leader has to be able to discern, is this teacher burnt out and so she needs relief and containment? Or is this her resisting and avoiding, and so we actually need accountability here? Is this resistance? Then it needs coaching. Or is this a misalignment of a role? We need to relane this person's role. Is this a skill gap? So it needs training? Or is it a will gap? There's no, I will do it. It's, yeah, I could do that. Okay. Can is very different than will. Will you do it? And if they are not willing to do it, that is, they need expectation and follow through, not training. They don't need any more training. They need consequence and follow through, right? Is this a capacity limit? They've reached their relational capacity limit. Okay, then we need to right size their load while they expand capacity. Or is this not the right container? So we need to restructure the role and introduce rhythm. Is this person having an emotional reaction to something, and so they need attunement and co-regulation? Or is this a structural breakdown and we need a system here? Is this person actually confused? So they need clarity. Or is this person being defensive? Well, they need containment, expectation, and consequence. Is this leader overwhelmed and needs help with prioritization? Or is this leader actually disengaged and she needs ownership? Is this a one-off mistake and it needs repair? Or is this a pattern of mistakes and it needs an interruption of the pattern? When leaders cannot discern the difference between these things, and these are just like 7 or 8 examples that I gave you, there are dozens of examples that happen throughout the day. When you can't discern the difference and externalize that discernment into rhythm, leaders overfunction. So leaders will reassure when they're actually supposed to reset expectation. They give empathy when they actually need to hold the standard. They coach when they're supposed to actually move the person out of that role. They absorb when they're supposed to redistribute the impact. They rescue when they actually should let the consequences teach. They fix the person when the problem is actually a structural issue. And over time, this blurring becomes very dangerous because it trains the team to outsource thinking upwards. Which is why owners say things like, I'm not doing any work, but I'm so tired and I'm still the center of gravity. Because you are. For many schools, thinking still lives inside of the owner, which is why leaders run meetings, but still need check-ins afterwards. Decisions are made, but need your reassurance. Issues are handled, but they still sit inside of your body. Because nothing is technically wrong. The school runs, schedules are filled, classrooms are staffed, but the organization doesn't fully think yet. It moves, it reacts, it executes. It doesn't discern. And when thinking stays centralized in the center of gravity, which is you, then the weight stays centralized also, which is why owners feel like they can't step back, or even when they do step back, they're still doing thinking. Because until discernment is shared, until leaders are trained not just to act, but to discern, the school keeps functioning, but you hold the invisible load. Rhythms are what redistribute thinking. They create predictable moments where discernment happens outside of you, where patterns are named, where distinctions are practiced, where the school learns how to discern signal from noise, not just how to operate. That's when the weight finally starts to shift. So I want to give you a couple of examples to make this very practical so you can see it, okay? Imagine a teacher, you don't have to imagine this because you've experienced it, who for the last couple weeks is showing up, but they're not present. Their lessons are technically fine, but they fall a little flat. They're doing the bare minimum, but not the work that they're capable of. Nothing's egregious, right? But something's off. So a school that runs without thinking, they would flag the behavior as a concern. They would have check-ins increase. Someone would be asked to keep an eye on it. People would take notes and document. And then the owner starts thinking about it at night, rehearsing conversations, wondering what to say next, trying to manage the emotional tone of what's the perfect way to say this. And so the energy becomes chasing, managing, and emotional holding. Everyone is busy, but no movement is actually happening. The teacher feels watched, the leader feels responsible, and the school starts orbiting around an issue without naming it. Sit with that for a second. That's heavy. And I know if you're listening to this episode, you can relate to some form of this example. I know that I've done this so many times, and it's not a character flaw. It's not a leadership flaw. It's a survival adaptation. It really, really is. So a thinking school asks questions. What season is this teacher in? Is this a short-term dip? Or is this part of a longer-term pattern with this teacher? Is this burnout? Is this a skill gap? Is this disengagement? Is this something that we have to intervene into? Or is this something that we should observe through rhythm? Sometimes the most disciplined answer is no action needed in this moment, not as avoidance or neglect, but as intentional observation. Because in a thinking school, discernment protects everyone. It prevents overcoaching. It prevents empathy from replacing standards. It prevents leaders from absorbing emotional weight when consequences are supposed to carry the weight. So I'll give you another example. A director who keeps bringing issues to you that are technically handled, but they still come to you for reassurance. So a school that is run would say, just make the decision, trust yourself, be more confident. A thinking school asks a different question. It says, is this a confidence issue or is this a rule clarity issue? Does this director have authority or responsibility without any power? Is she requesting reassurance? Or is the power of this decision not really centralized to her? Because the response changes everything. A rhythm where decisions are reviewed predictably, not emotionally, is how the thinking moves out of the owner and into infrastructure. I'll give you one more example. A parent complaint comes in, and in a school that runs well, they'll appease, explain, fix, absorb. And the leader becomes the buffer. In a school that thinks on its own, the leader can say, is this a one-off emotional need? Or is this complaint part of a signal of a systemic breakdown inside of the way we're communicating with families? Does this complaint require repair? Or does this complaint mean we actually need to reinforce our policy? The action changes based on the discernment. Schools that are run only react. Schools that think know how to differentiate and discern. Leaders confuse running the school with progress because running feels productive. Things move, calendars fill, tasks get complete. It looks like leadership because ambiguity doesn't care how efficient your systems are, right? Ambiguity hits, and it always does. In run-only systems, people freeze. In thinking systems, people adapt and know how to respond. So if you're still being pulled in, it doesn't mean you didn't delegate well, and it doesn't mean your team is incapable, and it doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It means you're still in the phase where your school is learning. How do we interpret reality without defaulting to the owner? So if you're in this phase, it's modeling. How do I ask better questions? How do we tolerate ambiguity? How do we hold standards without panic? How do we decide without overcorrecting? That is teaching the nervous system of the school to think, not you. So you don't step back when things are calm or when you're overwhelmed and you're like, just deal with it. You step back when the school can name drift without spiraling, relane roles without emotional fallout, tolerate quiet without making up stories, hold boundaries without checking on you, sit in uncertainty without escalating. Only then does running without you become real freedom. Not because the leadership is done, but because thinking no longer lives in your body. You stay connected to the school until your school can think without you, not until your school can run without you. And what that means is discernment is shared. Interpretation doesn't default upwards. Discernment doesn't require your presence. That's when delegation is real freedom and real liberation. Leaving too early doesn't make you free. It actually makes you essential forever. Staying long enough to teach discernment and thinking is how you become optional in the most healthiest way. And so if you're in this phase, you are not behind. You're doing the part that most leaders don't even realize exists. And in my book, This Can't Be Normal, I write about this in several different chapters, layering how to install discernment and discernment rhythms at a very practical level. Thanks so much for joining me today. Hey there. If you're the one who notices problems before anyone else does, this is for you. You're the one who sees things first. The tension in the room, the teacher sleeping who just might quit. You're already tracking the consequences. Who will be upset? Who will push back? So even on days that look fine or feel calm, your body doesn't fully stand down. You go to sleep tired and you wake up already bracing. Not because today is chaotic or any day is chaotic, but because something could go wrong. And you know you'll be the one that's holding it. It's the responsibility that can sometimes feel crushing. You stay alert, reliable, and steady because you've seen what happens when things aren't held, when communications slip, when standards soften, when everyone assumes someone else will step in. And because you're so good at holding it, more of it finds its way to you, quietly, gradually, until no one sees how heavy it's become. This is not burnout, and this is not a discipline problem. It's what I call the invisible weight of leadership. If you see yourself in this, or even if your breath changed just a little bit, that's enough. And if you want to keep going and learn more, the opening chapter of my book, This Can't Be Normal, What to Do When Success Starts to Feel Like Survival. My book continues this conversation. You can go ahead and download chapter 1 for free and continue this dialogue. If you are loving the Schools of Excellence podcast and have gotten any value out of it for your school, I would love if you can do 2 things for me. 1, subscribe to the show so you never miss an episode. And 2, can you please leave us a review? Reviews help other school leaders know that this is the place to learn how to build a school of excellence. And I would be so grateful if you can do that for us. Your help and support makes this show to be able to be listened by the thousands of other school leaders all around the world. Thanks so much for listening, for giving us your time and attention each and every week, and I appreciate that you have joined us.